Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to express balanced power from within, then do we have the Wisdom Rising show for you. Today I'll be talking with Lama Tsultrim Allione, the founder of Tara Mandala, the author of Women of Wisdom and Feeding Your Demons, one of the first Western Buddhist nuns and recognized as the reincarnation of the renowned 11th century Tibetan yogini, and the author of an empowering new book, Wisdom Rising. And that's just what I want to talk with her about today, about a journey into the mandala of the empowered feminine and what it means for all of us. That, plus we'll talk about 8 Willard Street in Cambridge, wandering Harvard Square, the Monkey Temple, eating like a barbarian, Bertha Grove, what in the world is a sky dancer, and what on earth does peppermint ice cream with little red peppermint candies have to do with anything? So, gotcha. Welcome to the show, Lama Tsultrim Allione. Are you ready to shine?
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, so beautiful, so brilliant to have you here. Before we dive right into things, do you mind if I ask, did you ever expect to become an ordained Tibetan Lama when you were a little girl?
No. Definitely not.
What were your earliest memories of, well, what kind of a child were you at your youngest years?
Well, I grew up in New Hampshire in the country, and I was a wild child. I loved riding my horse in the forest, swimming in the lakes, skiing, being in the woods with my siblings. I loved nature. I think that's what stands out for me. I don't think I would be considered like a spiritual child, particularly. I was more active, involved with a lot of sports and physical activity.
From what you describe of your last day at school at 11, or after that last day, and maybe you can share with us, it sounds more like you were a child of the earth.
Yeah. I remember this one particular day because at the time when I was going to school, girls had to wear dresses, and I always hated wearing dresses. And so on the last day of school, I actually ripped all the buttons off my dress, ripping my dress off. I was so happy I wouldn't have to wear it again until September. And that was, and then put on my cutoff jean shorts and my kid sneakers and head for the woods. And yeah, that's the kind of child I was. Kind of a tomboy, I'd say.
And I think your parents said you would eat like a barbarian?
Yeah, that's what my mother would say. I like to gnaw on bones, and she would say, "Darling, I'm raising a barbarian." I thought that sounded good.
That was very foretelling, wasn't it?
Kind of, yeah.
Were your parents very spiritual?
No, not particularly. They were more like bodhisattva types in the sense that my father was a newspaperman. He published a small town newspaper in Keene, New Hampshire, called the Keene Evening Sentinel. And he really tried to create a newspaper that served the whole community and would improve the community. And my mother had been a labor mediator before her marriage to my father. And she worked a lot for the League of Women Voters.
Cool. And
then helping to create a mental health facility for the community. It was the first mental health initiative in that little town in New Hampshire.
Very cool. Now, I grew up not too far, about 15 miles, some 15 to 18 miles from Harvard Square. And I love to hang out there on occasion in the summertime. You know, everybody's outside playing chess. You go into the shops there. You look at all the books. You came across an interesting one from Carl Jung.
Yes. Yeah. I was walking around the square, as you said, and really the square it's a little bit deceptive in terms of the name because it's really like a traffic crossing, intersection with a bunch of roads come together. But it is really the center of Cambridge. and there on the corner, there's the Harvard Coop, we called it, which is really the co-op. And I was in there, and they have a lot of books in there. And I remember actually even the position. It was down on a table, you know, facing up. And this book, it's called Man and His Symbols. And it was a book that Jung did with other people. He wasn't the only author of the book. There were essays by von Franz and other people who were close colleagues of his. But what struck me was there was a Tibetan mandala on the cover. And so I started looking at this mandala, and then I kind of traveled into the mandala. And it took me somewhere. And it was nothing had ever done that to me before. And so I bought the book and then found there were more mandalas inside, Tibetan mandalas, but also the idea of how this mandalic form appears in the structure of cities and the rose windows and like in Chartres and in natural arisings like flowers and so on, that this mandalic form naturally arises. And so I really was drawn to these Tibetan mandalas. It was something about the Tibetan mandalas that drew me. And then I was like, Tibet, what's Tibet? You know, we had no idea.
Yep.
And then I looked it up in the encyclopedia that we had in the hallway of our house and read everything I could find about Tibet. And it was kind of like a bell was ringing in my head as this was taking place. I was raised Unitarian, Unitarian Universalist. And so my parents were open to us exploring different spiritual paths. And so I ended up following that thread of the mandala to India and Nepal when I was 19, and went to Dharamsala where the Dalai Lama had just arrived as he was exiled from Tibet with the Chinese invasion. I arrived there I think it was about 8 years after he got there, so pretty early on in a way. And then I wanted to learn how to paint mandalas because I had become a painter, an artist. And that was really my initial sort of avenue of entry into Buddhism, was through the mandala.
Bear with me one moment. I'm going to take a pause as we have a cat that I didn't realize was in the studio. And he is saying, may I please get out of the studio while you continue your interview? So bear with me 1 second. My apologies. Thank you. So what did the mandala mean to you at that time?
It wasn't anything cognitive. It wasn't conceptual. It was the mystical quality of this design on paper or on canvas, which seemed to have an effect, a centering effect, a calming effect, a deepening effect by looking at it. That's what interested me.
And you went over there and you went to Dharamsala. Before that, if I understood right, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, but it has to do with monkeys. You ended up at Swayambhu.
Yeah, the monkey temple. Yes. So yes, before Dharamsala, I was in Kathmandu, Nepal. This was 1967. And I was drawn to this place, which is a huge stupa, which is a kind of giant Buddhist reliquary that looks kind of like a big half dome, white, with a spire, gold spire on top of different levels. And then there are niches in the four directions around it. But it's big. It probably, with a spire, 3 stories or higher. And, you know, as a young girl from New Hampshire, I'd never seen anything like this. And I'd never seen a monk before, a Tibetan monk. And So the whole thing, it was kind of that feeling of when you smell something familiar, but you can't quite remember what it is, but you know that you've smelled that before. Mm-hmm. That was the sensation I had around the Tibetans. And I was very drawn to their morning pujas. In the morning, they would do these practices with those huge, long Tibetan horns and bells and drums and chanting and so on. So I started getting up early in the morning, and it was really quite early. I don't know, it was before the light, and going up there and sitting in these pujas every day, to the point where they started leaving a little carpet in the corner for me. And tea. I started getting tea when the monks got tea. And so it ended up actually being my monastery much later, but somehow I'd already been adopted.
I love it. So how did you end up going from there to meeting the Karmapa? And for those who aren't familiar, who was at that time the 16th Karmapa?
Mm-hmm. So I was in India that first time in 67 for about 6 months, India and Nepal. Then I came back to the United States, went back to college because I hadn't finished my BA, and my parents were very concerned about that. So I tried to go back, mm-hmm. And I went for a year, and I just wanted to get back to the Tibetans. It was something very inexplicable. I mean, now I know why, but at the time it was all just these intuitions. Mm-hmm. So I left. I left and went to Europe, and then ended up finding Samye Ling, which was the first Tibetan monastery in the West in Dumfriesshire, Scotland. I went there and met Trungpa Rinpoche, who was an early teacher in the United States of Tibetan Buddhism. And then I traveled overland from London to Kathmandu.
In a VW bus, from what I understand.
Yes. VW bus, 2 new engines, being towed 200 miles over windy mountain roads in Turkey. Incredible dust. Dirt roads, I mean, for days, weeks. So there was no road across Afghanistan at that time. And so they were making the road, but it was this big dirt road.
And so you get there, and who is, this time it was the 16th, who was the Karmapa?
So the Karmapa, the 16th Karmapa, was in Kathmandu when I got back. By now it's the end of 1969. Yep. He's there for the first time in 13 years, and everybody's abuzz with the Karmapa. Karmapa had been there, and a very important lama for all the Tibetans that were there. And also in Kathmandu, it wasn't a big city at that time. It was a city, but more like a large village, or a sort of cluster of different villages. So everyone was abuzz with this presence of this Tibetan Lama, Karmapa. But I had been told by my friend Vicky, who I went to India with before in 67, that she had met Karmapa in Sikkim with her parents, who were diplomat, and that he was very fat, and he wore a gold watch, and he couldn't possibly be spiritual if he was fat and wore a gold watch. And so I agreed with her. I thought, that's right. He couldn't possibly be spiritual if he looks like that.
He must be wiry like Yogananda.
Yeah. Like Kalu Rinpoche, thin, austere kind of yogi was my idea. So I had a lot of resistance to meeting him. But everyone was going to meet him. And finally, my friends convinced me to go with them. And so after the black hat ceremony, in which he puts on a crown given to him by the Chinese emperor that's fashioned after a crown he was given by the dakinis, who will, I guess we'll talk about a little later.
Yes.
See, female's embodiment of wisdom. He was given this copy of a crown that they had woven for him out of their hair. And when he does this ceremony, he sits holding the hat on, and then he does the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum Shri, because if he doesn't hold the hat on, it's said that it will fly away because it's the hair of the dakinis, who are sky-going dancers. So I had quite an intense experience during the ceremony, which I was surprised by, since I had this preconceived notion about him not being spiritual. And then when we went up for blessings at the end, it sort of all the Tibetans sort of surge forward at the end, and then you sort of squeeze through this little door, and then you pop out one by one in front of him, and he blesses you. And so I did that. And here I was wearing a long quilted turquoise coat from Afghanistan. I had my hair in braids with silk woven into my hair, and, you know, basically like a traveler, you know, been traveling from London all that way. And so I rose my gaze and looked at him, which later I heard you're not actually supposed to do that, but I did. I didn't know any better. And there he was, and he was smiling, this incredible smile that was like, it was like this, as big as the world. And his size really made sense because he was such a magnanimous, large presence. And so everything melted away about my conceptions after that. And then I ended up requesting ordination from him as a Buddhist nun, which was actually the last thing I thought I'd ever be.
What was your mindset at that point? Because I think later on you were told that he had recognized you as such, but what was going on inside that said, all right, let's do this?
Well, after meeting him that first time at the Black Crown ceremony, I started to feel like there was something I was supposed to do, and that was to find my teacher, to find my guru. And I was still convinced it wasn't him, but I got really kind of charged up and felt there was something I was supposed to do. And then finally I remembered this line in the sadhana. Sadhana is a tantric practice that I had been given by Trungpa Rinpoche in Scotland and had been doing daily since I had left Scotland. And the line was, the only offering I can make is to follow your example. And so I connected this with him being a monk and me being a nun. And that's what I should do. It was like a light bulb, like, that's it. That's this thing I'm supposed to do. And then also I met a yogi at that time who I thought looked like my guru should look. And so I asked him if I could study with him. And he had a picture of Karmapa on the shrine, and he picked up the picture, and he didn't speak English, but he just gave it to me. And he said, "This is your guru." So those things combined, and I went to him one morning and brought flowers and just made the motion of cutting my hair, which means taking vows. And then he looked at me, this long, steady gaze, as though he was really looking to see who I was and reading all my past lives, and like, who is this young woman? And then he said yes. But he didn't want to ordain me there. He wanted to ordain me in Bodhgaya, where the Buddha was enlightened. And so I had to get some robes and get down to India, kiss my boyfriend goodbye.
Wow.
And smoke my last bidi, this little roll-up cigarette. So, I was not like a nun at all. And so I smoked my last BD, kissed him goodbye, and got on the plane and flew to Patna. And then I think I got a train to Gaya, and then a rickshaw to Bodhgaya, something like that. And then I was ordained in January of 1970.
I saw the picture in your book of you in your robes before your hair is cut. You're
Yeah.
like mid-transition at that point.
Yeah. That just happened to be taken by this Bhutanese doctor who was the one who told me that His Holiness had made a prophecy about me becoming a nun and benefiting beings with the Dharma in the future. So he was kind of my guide as I went through this whole process, because he was the only one that spoke English, and he took that picture.
I find it fascinating. You went through vows, and one of those vows, of course, is celibacy, and we'll jump ahead in the story in a moment. But there was a connection that I made that I found fascinating. It has to do with something you said a few minutes ago, which is a dakini, which maybe we can define now, and we'll dive ahead into that in more detail in a few minutes. But a dakini, you said, is a sky dancer, and one of your vows, if I understand correctly, was no dancing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's why I wasn't very suitable to be a nun. I did it for about 4 years, and it was certainly an interesting thing, because I had boyfriends and been involved in that usual thing that young people are involved in, trying to find the one and so on. And so I stopped that, and I was celibate, and that experience for me was really important, because I was a woman unto herself. And what I talk about in Women of Wisdom, my first book, is how that experience was like being the maiden, belonging to no man. And, so much of my energy had been going into this thing about men, and so I stopped that and became independent of them, which was also challenging. But I think what happened was I came home to myself in a way that if I hadn't had that time of celibacy and monasticism, I wouldn't have gained that confidence and also the depth of practice that happened because of being celibate and living in retreat in the Himalayas.
It's impressive, because that depth of practice was, I would say, maybe there's a different word, but substantially, I'll use instead of severely, substantially challenged almost immediately after you gave up that vow, because almost immediately afterwards, here you are getting married and soon after with child. And maybe we should dive into that, but I guess first off, what happened immediately after your vow, and then what happened when you conceived?
When right after I took my vows, I came out of the room, and it was a hotel room in Bodhgaya where His Holiness was staying. And Dr. Jigme came up to me and said, I didn't want to tell you this because I didn't want to influence your decision, but His Holiness told me that first time when he saw you in Swayambhu after the first black crown, that you would become a nun, and that he had a strong connection with you from past lives, and that you would benefit many beings with the Dharma. Yeah. So he said that. And then what was your second question?
Well, when you you didn't renounce. This was fascinating. In a sense, I'd never heard this before. You returned your vows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that was a big decision for me, because I actually was quite happy as a nun, but it didn't feel like it would be right for me to be a nun for my whole life. And I started dreaming about a baby.
On your shoulder, right?
Yeah. Yeah, not a baby, like maybe a 1 or 2 year old child. And then I went to see my teacher, Abu Rinpoche, and I said, Rinpoche, I keep dreaming about a baby on my shoulder. And he started laughing, and he couldn't stop laughing. He was laughing so hard he was drooling. And I was like, what's so funny? And he said, all nuns should have babies. And I thought, what is he saying? And he said, and he kind of calmed down after a while. And then he said, of Guru Rinpoche's 25 disciples, Guru Rinpoche was the tantric master who brought the Vajrayana teachings to Tibet in the 8th century. He said of Guru Rinpoche's 25 disciples, very few were monastics. They were almost all lay people, and they propagated the Dharma in Tibet. Without them, we wouldn't have the Dharma in Tibet that we have today. And so don't worry, because I was very worried that if I were to return my vows and become a mother, that would be the end of my Dharma usefulness, that I would just kind of go off into worldly life and not have the connection with the lamas that I had and not be able to practice and so on. So he sort of assuaged my worries. And then I made the decision to return my vows, and pretty quickly got pregnant and had my first child.
Woohoo!
Yeah, got married in there too.
And if I understand, when you conceived, you both share the same dream as well.
Yeah, and the picture of that dream is in the book. It's an abstract image that is circular. It's a mandala, essentially. But in Tibetan Buddhism, the red essence is feminine and the white essence is male. And so in this image, this mandala that we saw was a circle with a white part on top and a red part on the bottom, and then some blue and white in the middle. It's quite an extraordinary image. Yes, and we both saw it, and we painted it the next day. It was luminous. It wasn't like kind of like an ordinary dream. It was like a light came into us, and that was our daughter Sherp, who's now 43 years old.
And has her own
2 children. Yeah.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
When were you introduced to the concept of a dakini, and what is a dakini?
I think the first time I heard the word was in Scotland when I was there with Trungpa Rinpoche, and his driver, Ted, said to me, Trungpa Rinpoche is looking for his dakini. And I said, what's that? And he said, it's like his consort. It's his partner. Mm-hmm. And so he didn't say that much more about it, but it's kind of stuck in my mind. And then the next time I heard it was about the hair of the dakinis forming the crown of the Karmapa. And so I don't think I really got a deeper understanding of it until I was a nun, and I started doing a practice of the dakini. Mm-hmm. And then I began to understand this was it wasn't just sort of like the girlfriend of the Lama, it was the wife of the Lama. That's one aspect that they say the dakinis, the wives of Lamas are dakinis, but there was another level of it where the dakinis is equal to a Buddha. Wisdom dakini's realization is considered to be as great as that of a Buddha in the Sambhogakaya dimension of pure luminosity. And so the dakinis have all these different levels. Some are human, some are historical figures that or in my first book, Women of Wisdom, their lives. And then there's this Dakini principle of the awakened feminine. And then the Dakini at the level of Sambhogakaya, in the dimension of luminosity, wisdom Dakinis. Plus there's also worldly Dakinis and so on. So it's a very interesting subject. And what interested me in it now is that I feel like this energy, this wave of energy that's coming with the Me Too movement and Time Is Up and all the other sort of the wave of women's activism that came with the Women's March and so on, that there's a kind of Dakini energy in that. And also that they could really benefit from knowing about the Dakinis, because the Dakinis are fierce. Not always, but often it's fierce feminine, fierce wise feminine. And the way that the spiritual options for women have been portrayed largely in the West is, if you're spiritual, you have to be really quiet, passive, always gentle and peaceful. And the Dakinis offer an option of fierce wisdom. And also they're sexual. They're owning their sexuality, but they're spiritual. So it's not like you have to choose here, it's the prostitute or the Madonna. It's neither. It's that our sexuality can be an empowered part of us, and we can also be fierce. And, so I think this can be scary for men, and maybe women as well, but especially for men. The wrathful female, it can be a terrifying idea. And so it's been squelched and turned into the witch and the nasty woman. And so what I saw with the Women's March and that whole owning that label, nasty woman, and taking it as a slogan of pride and strength, that there was a correspondence or a potential correspondence with knowing about the Dakinis and a process of empowering, empowering, through the mandala of the 5 Dakinis that could help the women and their allies who were in this kind of tidal wave of energy that is rising now.
It's fascinating. I'm like, do I go there? Do I not go there? I had a dream many years ago, and I woke up and I told Jessica, she's my wife, she's the producer of the show, and I said, "You're a Dakini." And I said, "I don't know what a Dakini is. I've never heard this term before, but you're a Dakini." And so I had to go up looking at it, searching it, and she does fit a lot of these characteristics. She is so motherly, so gentle, and so fierce, and will burn away any untruths or anything that is being hidden will be pulled out, ripped out, and put before the light before you can go like that. What is empowering, and what is this process of empowering?
Well, empowerment to me, there's empowerment, outward empowerment, like equal rights, equal pay, being able to own your own business, and so on, not be dependent, and so on. That's all empowerment. And so what I realize is we need to have empowerment, empowerment, in order to not be drained by or in some way burnt out by our external empowerment efforts. And so empowerment in the sense that I'm talking about it, especially with the mandala principle, has to do with coming into the centering template of the mandala of the 5 dakinis. There's 5 different kinds of dakinis. Coming into that template so that you are the mandala. You're not meditating on the mandala as something outside or looking at it on the wall and visualizing it externally. You become the 5 dakinis, that experience that you have in the meditation and through the sounds connected to the dakinis and so on becomes something that you can draw upon in your outer life. So it's an empowering practice that then leads to a support of outer empowerment.
Maybe we can talk more about, maybe we should look at what are the 3 outer, inner, and the secret, and then the 5 dakinis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the outer mandala is our world. Our, like right now, I'm looking out at some trees and so on. I have around me my students, my family, my world, so to speak, is my mandala, and you have yours. You have your mandala. You're in your mandala, and normally we think of ourselves as kind of more linearly, like there's me and my wife, and we're on our path. And I don't know if you have kids or, you know, I don't know what the rest of your life is, but you know, you have your life. When we think of that as sort of a linear process that we're enacting, when you're in the mandala and in your own centered place, then you're already arrived. You're not going somewhere that you haven't arrived. So maybe we could just, as I'm talking about this, maybe the listeners could think about their own mandalas and feel themselves in the center of their mandalas as their lives are, and you know, their home is the palace of the mandala, and even if you're homeless, you're still in your mandala. So that creates a centering experience. The inner mandala is the mandala of the deities, and that's the Sambhogakaya level, which is a dimension of luminosity. So it's not this dimension that we are in right now of the elements, you know, of earth, water, fire, air, and so on, space. It is light. It's a dimension of light. And this is where the wisdom dakinis abide. And so when you enter that mandala, there's, I think you could really say quite literally, an illuminating process that takes place, because you illuminate your own body through the sound and the light, and then you hold that with certain colors, with symbolic meaning, and so on. So that's the inner mandala, and in the book there's charts of these mandalas and so on. And then the secret mandala is the energy itself, the essence of our own inner world, our own kind of secret spiritual awakenedness that doesn't have a particular form.
And then, thank you. So if we go to the wisdom dakinis and we talk about the 5 dakinis, maybe we can talk briefly about each one, and we'll be doing a meditation on the end on this. What is the Buddha dakini?
The Buddha dakini is in the center of the mandala. She's related to the element of space. She's white. Her obstructed pattern is spaciness, which can take the form of procrastination, depression, denial, kind of putting the wool over your own eyes, being confused. Oh, I don't know what's happening. You know, that kind of befuddlement, bewilderment. So each of the dakinis has transformed from an encumbered pattern to a wisdom. And so this encumbered pattern, or the simple name of it is ignorance, becomes all-encompassing wisdom. So space, spaciness becomes spaciousness. All-encompassing wisdom is vast awareness of total space. Wisdom of Dharma Dhatu in Sanskrit. Dharma Dhatu is basic space, total space. So that's Buddha. Space, ignorance, all-encompassing wisdom. When you are the mandala, in front of you then is, in the east, is Vajra Dakini. She's blue, like the autumn sky. She is the element of water. She's the transformation of anger, both hot and cold anger. And that transforms into mirror-like wisdom. So what that means is that your mind becomes like a mirror where everything, and maybe as I'm describing this, listeners could also try to feel into an experience of these wisdoms. So if you make your mind like a mirror, well, you don't have to make it like one because it already is like one. When you think about just sight, what's happening? You're actually mirroring everything you're seeing. That's why you're seeing it, because it's a mirror. So all our senses are like that. We're perceiving in a mirror-like way our world. So if you recognize that the mind is like a mirror, you could enter into that experience of reflectivity and clarity that a mirror has. You know, think about the telescopes. They have to get the purest kind of mirror, right, to make a good telescope, the most refined. So our minds are like very refined mirrors, and they don't have to judge what passes in front of them. That's the conceptual mind, but the mind itself is simply a mirror. So if something beautiful passes in front of me, and I'm in mirror-like wisdom, I don't go after it and judge it and grasp and cling. Or something ugly passes in front, I don't have to grasp that either. I can just stay in this wide, clear, clarity is very important in Vajra family, clear state. And anger can be very clear. You know, when you're angry, you can be like super clear. But if you stay just in the clarity, that's mirror-like wisdom. So that's the east, blue color, element of water, anger, into mirror-like wisdom.
I want to pause you before you go through the rest of them. Do we each have elements of all of these in us, or do we relate to more of one or another?
Both. We have elements of all of them. And usually you could say, you know, I am Buddha family, or I am Vajra, or I am Padma as my primary family.
Thank you.
But we all have elements of all of them.
And then going to Ratna.
Ratna would be on your right-hand side. Here the element is earth. The color is golden yellow. The obstructed pattern is pride. And the wisdom is the wisdom of equanimity. And this is connected to the earth. And so pride or arrogance has inherently in it a lack of trust in ourselves, and a feeling of not being good enough, not being enough in ourselves. And so we need to puff ourselves up to cover that up. When we're in the wisdom of this, we release the struggle, and each wisdom is the same energy as the obstructed pattern, but the struggle is released. Struggle of ego clinging. Struggle is released, and there we are in the wisdom of equanimity, evenness, stillness, enriching presence, trusting the earth. So that's Ratna. That's on our right. And each Dakini also has a different body type. Like the Buddha Dakini has a round kind of body, round and smooth. Vajra is angular, thin, Ratna is a full body, like a large, statuesque, sort of generous body type. And Ratna is also connected to prosperity. And encumbered Ratna is feelings of poverty mentality. So then behind us, in the West, we have red, and the color of passion, and it is passion. And it's the element of fire. And the obstructive pattern is craving and grasping, the need to create a sense of security through being able to magnetize the right relationship. So it's that feeling of I would be complete if I could just magnetize the right person. And so it's a compulsive seduction pattern, but the obstructive Padma can't really be in long-term relationship because they're so stuck with the seduction. They don't feel comfortable when that kind of magnetizing game stops, lose interest, because it's in that magnetism that the ego feels alive and safe. Ego always wants to try to feel safe. So that transforms into wisdom of discernment. And it's kind of what sometimes the wisdoms are easy to see. Oh yeah, like spacey becomes spacious, but it's still difficult for me to understand the wisdom of discernment and Padma, seduction. But then I thought about how when you're trying to seduce someone, how discerning you are about them. You see what they like, and when you say this, they respond this way, and so on. And so when the ego drops away, which is what happens when we get the wisdom to reveal itself, when that magnetizing quality drops away, there's an ability to see relationships. And so passion becomes compassion. For example, like the Dalai Lama, he's very magnetizing, right? His smile and so on, it's very magnetizing. But he's operating out of compassion, not passion. He's not trying to establish his ego through getting people. He's just magnanimous. It's only his Karmapa. It's like that as well. So that's the Padma family, wisdom of discernment. And then the last family, which would be on our left, the north, green, air, jealousy and envy, transforming into all-accomplishing wisdom. So in a way, there's a way also to track the families developmentally and until you finally get to action in the karma family. So this is called karma family. Karma means action, and it's connected to the element of wind, air. So karma family people are always moving. The body type is kind of wispy. So it's thin, like Vajra's thin, but it's more like thin and sort of wispy, like you feel like this person could kind of almost disappear or get so windy, that it would, you'd hardly feel them present. And there's also kind of windy in the sense of being winded through ambition. And so it's a kind of workaholic tendency, speediness. This needs to be done now. Why wasn't it done today? It's kind of compulsive work and never feeling like it's done. So that shifts into all-accomplishing wisdom. And so you, again, release the struggle, and then the action just takes place naturally. It's the flow rather than the force. In karma family, what we see a lot when we're in the wisdom is synchronicity. Things kind of falling into place naturally. You meet the person you needed to meet, and so on. So that kind of synchronicity element is present when karma family wisdom is present.
Beautiful. How do we switch to the wisdom or release the struggle?
You want to know that, huh?
Well,
yeah, that's the key thing to know. Well, through sound and through color and visualization and meditation, essentially. Those are the elements.
And so we dive into that. In fact, we'll dive into a meditation in a few minutes. We've just moved here to Colorado, about 4 hours or so away from you. And for the last couple of days, as we've been in our home and we've been walking around the land asking what the land wants us to do with it, for the last couple of days I've been going, we need an altar. We need an altar. We need an altar. And before I dove into your book, I'm looking at the downstairs and I'm going, that's it. This is going to be our shrine room. And then going through your book, all of a sudden I get Dakini mandala altar. What is that? And do we want to create some sort of an altar in our home? Even if we're not changing our religion, is an altar important for us?
Yes, altar is very important. Carl Jung said, a home without an altar is like a person with no soul. Why? Because the altar represents our spiritual life. And so when you have an altar in your home, or you can have several, you can have one in every room, you have a reflection outside of your inner process. And so every time you walk by that altar, you're going to get reminded of your inner process. It also allows, like in a family with children and so on, there's a family altar. It's a gathering place for the spiritual life of the family. And I like altars that aren't necessarily super traditional, although I do have a traditional altar. My altar is also somewhat not traditional in the sense that it's, I have different things on my altar. So you can, my kids all had their own altars in their rooms as they were growing up, and that was very important for them to find things and take it to their altar, to move things around on their altar. So it creates this outer reflection of the inner process.
Very, very cool. And are there any rules or any thoughts about creating an altar, what we want to do?
Well, I mean, there's rules in the sense if you want to create a traditional Tibetan Buddhist altar, certain offerings and so on, and the way they're set up. But I, in the book, suggest an altar to the mandala of the 5 dakinis that can be made very simply with even a cardboard box, something square. It could be a square table. And then we actually have altar kits that you can get from Tara Mandala, quite simple ones or more elaborate ones. But you have scarves or colored fabric of the 5 colors, white, blue, yellow, red, and green. And you place them in the correct direction. And then 5 votive candles with the votive candle holders in those 5 colors. And so you have this very simple mandala. And once you then know the meaning of these 5 families and you're doing the mandala meditation, then you have the simple reminder of the inner template of wholeness that you're placing your mind in your practice. You're seeing that outside as well.
Beautiful. So since you mentioned you can go over to Tara Mandala, what is Tara Mandala? Where is Tara Mandala? And what is this beautiful, beautiful temple that I see behind me?
Yeah. Yeah, you're a Tara Mandala, Michael. Yeah. So behind Michael is the temple at Tara Mandala, and you can see that it is a mandala. It has 4 doorways, coming out in the four directions. And inside that, at the lower level, it's okay, you didn't have to move. Inside that is a circular temple with life-size statues of the 21 Taras in a circle around it, extraordinary Tara statues, each one different because they represent different qualities. Some are peaceful, some are semi-wrathful, and some are wrathful or fierce. So, and then the second floor behind you, it's so nice that you have that picture when I'm describing it. That's the library, Tibetan and English books, Sanskrit as well. And then there's offices, there's a lama, visiting lama, place to stay. And I have a place to stay there too. That's mine in that area in the back on the right.
Okay.
That's my space in the mandala. And then that piece that's sort of closer to you, to my right, that's a meeting room. We call it the Lama Lounge.
Very cool.
Where we have meetings and so on. And then the third floor upstairs there is the Dharmakaya.
Yeah.
There's each kaya. That's another round room, octagonal actually, that is blue inside and very simple. I dreamt this temple on the Buddha's birthday, 2001, and the blue on the third floor was the first thing that I saw. I saw a blue room. And then I woke up out of my sleep and I went into meditation and the whole temple kind of downloaded.
Wow.
But that blue represents the Dharmakaya, which is the formless dimension of enlightenment. That second floor is Sambhogakaya, which is that dimension of luminosity and speech. Top one is mind. And then the bottom is body, and that's where the actual statues are, and so on. So we have 700 acres of land there, and people in long-term retreat. We have someone who's now in a 5-year retreat there, and we have some people in year retreats, and you can come and rent a cabin there for as little as 4 days. So you don't have to go for 5 years. But my original impetus for creating this place, which was born really at the time when I was a nun back in India, and I had the idea to create a place where the depths of meditation that had been experienced in Tibet could be experienced in the West. So really a retreat center was my idea. And so I feel that depth meditation, when people are in long-term retreat, that's affecting the whole world. And there used to be many more people in retreat, Christian monastics and so on, in India and Tibet and so on. There's fewer and fewer people doing that now. And there's a level that I experienced when I was in retreat for a year that I really felt I could help humanity more from that place of being in constant meditation and praying for all beings. And like 9/11 happened when I was in retreat. So I did 7 weeks of practice for the deceased, which if I'd been out and busy, so on, I wouldn't have had time to do that. So this notion of retreat is very important at Tara Mandala. And then there's group retreats that happen in this temple. People coming and going, and now it's summer, and so there's retreats all the time. And then also Tara Mandala is an international network of centers and communities and sitting practice groups in the United States and Europe and also in South Africa and a few other places around the world. So it's a place, and love to have you come visit sometime. Maybe we can do a show from there. And
Woohoo!
yeah, yeah, and it's also a network of of practice groups and people.
Is there a way, and we'll get to wrap this down quickly and get into a brief meditation, is there a way to bring retreat back to the home?
We have to do that. And that's our daily practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to have a time in every day where we go into a state of wholeness, where we stop. Because the ego is always going out and grasping, and just the sitting itself is stopping. It's physical stopping, and then mental stopping, and sort of getting the car out of drive into neutral, and maybe even reverse. So that's what I would suggest to people. And the meditation that's in my book, Wisdom Rising Journey into the Mandala of the Empowered Feminine. There's several meditations in the book, and there's the 5 Dakini meditation in there. And so, I thought I could maybe lead your listeners in a simple meditation to just have a little bit of experience of one of the families.
Would love that. Before you do that, can you tell us where to go to get your beautiful book and to find out about Tara Mandala?
Yeah, you can go to Amazon to get the book. That's an easy way to do it, or ask your local bookstore. And also, in about 10 days to 2 weeks on Amazon, you can get the Audible version of it. There's already a Kindle version, but the Audible that you can listen to without the book. So, yes, that's where you can get the book. And then Tara Mandala has a website, of course. And so it's Tara Mandala, and that's spelled TaraMandala.org, O-R-G. And also, I'm very active on Facebook under Lama Tsultrim Allione. And I imagine that you'll have this in some sort of written form for people.
Absolutely. So what I'm going to do, we'll have taramandala.org listed. We'll have your Facebook link listed as well, so we can get people right over there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've been doing a lot of live Facebook teachings. So that's people have been really enjoying that. As I travel around, I do these live teachings.
Woohoo!
Yay!
Before we do the meditation, then, any last words of wisdom you want to share with people? Oh, wait, Jessica, I can hear her in my head. Any words of wisdom you want to give parents for their kids today?
Well, I'm very empathetic to that situation, being a mother of 3 and grandmother to 6. I think with parents, one little idea that I really enjoyed and did a lot with my kids was to create altars with them. And that could be done in their room, to have an altar for them in their room that they decide what will be on it. And then also in nature, when you go out to play with them, in the woods or in a park, instead of the normal kind of playing, create an altar. Or at the beach. Now it's summer. You can make a mandala also at the beach. And there's a description of how to make a mandala in the natural world also in the book. And that's a fun game to do with kids. And also they learn from it. And also drawing mandalas with them is a way they begin to get this concept. And plus they enter into that template of wholeness, which has an effect on them.
Gives me goosebumps. Any last words of wisdom you want to share with everybody then? And then we'll dive into a meditation.
I think I would go again with this theme of the altar. It's, if we did grow up religious, usually the altar was at church or in the temple. To own that yourself and to create that in your home or in your closet. Some people have closet altars. It depends what your space is, but some space that's dedicated to your own internal development and reflects that for you. And this the mandala is a good basic form. And as I said, we have these little kits if you want something to get started with. I think that's important. And the other just basic thing is to work for the benefit of all beings. That create that vast meditation of bodhicitta, to really think about your life and every morning think, I want to do my day to day for the benefit of all beings. I want to wash the dishes for the benefit of all beings. Create a vast aspiration, because any action that you do then can have a much wider impact if your motivation is wider. And motivation is something we always have. You know, when we got out of bed this morning, we had some motivation. And so if you create that bodhicitta motivation to benefit all beings, then that is a really important and wonderful thing to do.
Can we be seeking joy for the benefit of all beings?
Yes.
Woohoo!
Or joy or wisdom or, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Would you mind leading us then in a meditation?
Yeah, I thought I could lead you in working with one of the 5 families.
Okay.
And so what we'll do, we'll just work with the color and the sound. Mm-hmm. Here, not the whole visualization of the Dakini. So as I described the 5 families, perhaps you found one that you thought, oh, that's me, or that's me today. And I'll just go around briefly and say them again, mm-hmm. so people can choose one to work with. So Buddha is ignorance transforming into the wisdom of spaciousness. That's in the center. Yeah. In the east is the blue Vajra, and Buddha is white, by the way. And the seed syllable of Buddha is Bam, B-A-M. And Vajra in the east, the seed syllable is Ha, mm-hmm. H-A. That's anger into mirror-like wisdom, color blue. The south is yellow, transformation of pride into the wisdom of equanimity. And the seed syllable is Ri, R-I. And then to the west, the seed syllable is Ni, N-I. And that's grasping and craving into the wisdom of discernment. And then in the north, anger. In the north is the obstructed pattern is jealousy and envy. Green, transforming into all accomplishing wisdom. And the seed syllable is Sa, S-A. So now what I'd like to do is for everyone to close their eyes, and I'll say the seed syllables one more time so you can choose the one you'll say. Bam in the center, white. Ha in the east, blue. Ri, R-I, in the south, yellow. Red, Ni, N-I, in the west, red. And in the north, green. Seed syllable is Sa. And so I'll sound the seed syllable Bam, and I'll work with the Buddha family, but you could choose another one, Michael, and sound that simultaneously, and I sound Bam. And people at home or wherever you are, choose one of these seed syllables, Bam, Ha, Ri, Ni, or Sa, and sound it. And as you do, allow that encumbered pattern that's associated with that color to transform into wisdom. And if you don't remember the specific wisdoms, don't worry about that. Just feel the energy being transformed through the the color and the sound. And so as we do this, we'll begin by connecting to the obstructed pattern, the what's called the poison or the encumbered pattern of the family that you're going to work with. So try to feel that in your body. How do you live that? How do you feel it in your body? And then as we sound the seed syllable, and as I say, I'll sound Bam, but everyone can sound whichever one they feel drawn to. See the color coming with the sound and going through your body, and your body transforming into the wisdom energy. So take a moment with the obstructed pattern. Really notice how it feels in your body. Notice the feeling of that color, that luminosity in your body, and the vibration of the sound. And again, we'll sound these 3 times. So we're allowing the sound to sound inward rather than sounding it out. Imagine that the sound is traveling into your body and the light is permeating your body, that color. One last time. Thank you, Michael. Thanks to everybody. The seed syllables and all these descriptions are in the book. And let's, as we end the meditation, dedicate any benefit that we generated to all beings everywhere, without one exception. Gewa din yoduda yeshe kandra druchune droa chicha maluba de salago barsho. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so, so much. This is truly beautiful, truly an honor.
Thank you. I hope we meet sometime.
I would love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. So, got to crank it back up for the finish here. For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get wisdom rising, and journey into the mandala today, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so, so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!